Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. Today we're excited to have the NIAAA President, Mike McGurk, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, as our guest. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Mark, thanks for inviting me. I'm pretty excited. I mean, there's been a long list of esteemed colleagues that have been on this podcast. It's
that's
cool
right.
to be invited.
And you're the very first from Missouri. So there you go.
Fantastic. I'll make sure Josh Scott is aware of that.
Yeah, very good. Why don't you begin by sharing with our audience here in Utah and across the nation where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, those types of things.
Yeah. Some people know I'm from Virginia originally. So born and raised in Fairfax County, which is a pretty big school district, and went to Chantilly High School, stayed in the area, went to college at George Mason University. Yes, the George Mason that made that Cinderella run to the Final Four a number of years ago. I actually got to attend the Final Four in Indy that year, which was kind of cool. Went to George Mason after my sophomore year, kind of decided I wanted to teach. And so I started substitute teaching as a junior in college. I took classes 2 days a week and substituted the other 3 and was coaching basketball at the time. And then jumped into field hockey and girls track. So those are my coaching backgrounds. When I started doing this, and had some really good role models that got me down that path, which I guess we'll get to at a later time. But, basketball was kind of my thing in high school. I enjoyed it a lot, not very good, but enough that I could pay attention, and kind of led to my passion in coaching and such. So it's pretty good to I had some great opportunities there and had some great people to work with. So that kind of got me on the road to athletic administration.
Very good. Were you able to play, what was the U Sports like in Fairfax County there? Lots of opportunities or not so much? Or?
Yeah, U Sports. Growing up, I played everything. I loved soccer for a bit, played baseball for some, football some, basketball, obviously, golf. I kind of did I think I was like more or less jack of all trades, master of none. I just liked to participate and be involved and do stuff. And growing up, not so much tons at the high school level or college level, but growing up, I definitely had some great opportunities to participate, and it got to meet a lot of great people who I'm still friends with today through sports.
Excellent. Well, you mentioned earlier some of the mentors that had an effect on you. So take a moment and share with our audience some of the people that had a big effect in your life early on in Virginia, in Missouri, and then, of course, nationally.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate, Mark, in that sense. When I first coming up through my high school basketball coach, Mark Martino, he's the one that got me started in the coaching track. And then he was the head varsity coach and I was one of his assistants. And when he got the athletic director job, he kind of said to me, hey, do you want to go down the head coach route or athletic administration route? So I kind of came to a crossroad, and he was kind of instrumental in me getting there. And then once I went down the athletic administration route, I had some great people to guide me my first couple of years. So Jeff Dietze, who's in the Hall of Fame, NIAAA Hall of Fame, Donna King, who's in the NIAAA Hall of Fame, and Dave Morgan, past president in NIAAA Hall of Fame, were all ADs in my conference, my area in Fairfax County.
Wow.
So early on, they got a hold of me and said, hey, you can have fun and play golf and do the stuff, have a day in the office, in the Hutch office. But you also have to do this professional development stuff. You need to take classes, you need to be on committees. And then, my first class was with Dick Kemper. Again, like I was really lucky to have so many great people to say that. And then to transition states, Mark, that's kind of hard because I feel like I was in position to Virginia to start taking on some leadership spots at that time. I had been AD for 6 years before coming to Missouri. And then I had to start over again, but with Marty O'Hearn, who's in the NIAAA Hall of Fame, Josh Scott, who will eventually, and some other folks, Jim Gagan, who's in the Hall of Fame, they in Missouri were instrumental in getting me involved with the state association and teaching classes and starting over again, but getting to know everybody in the state. And then nationally, once I jumped on a committee, I was fortunate enough, as you probably know, the awards committee, right? I mean, that had I look at who was on that committee my first year. It was like Cass Herbst, Lannis Robinson, Rich Barton. You could go down the list of people who have been past presidents or award winners, and a lot of them sitting on the awards committee. So I, again, had a great experience of working and networking with people. And, being on the awards committee, you get to know all the people who win awards. So each year you're getting to learn probably 20 to 25 people and get to know them personally. And so that helped too, as I did that for 6 years, serving on the awards committee, and then as the chair by last year there. So I had some great people, and I hope my goal is to hopefully be able to do that to younger ADs as they start working through the process of professionally growing through our associations.
Allow me to add a few more awards committee highlights from, because when you got on, I was gone. But some of the vice chairs for me when I was the chair of the awards committee, Joni Paps, Hall of Fame, Bobby Rossi, Andy Childs, Army, both past presidents. I mean, that's incredible. So thank you for that shout out. Let's have a more serious question for a moment here, Mike. What's your biggest failure or disappointment, and what did you learn from it?
Wow. See, this is such an easy question because there's so many to pick from. I think, one of the great things is we get to learn from our failures. And I've been on some other podcasts and talked about different things. And this one, I decided that my first failure or biggest one, I think, was when I became the AD at James Robinson Secondary School, which at the time was the biggest school in the state of Virginia. It's a 7 through 12, and we had about 4,200 kids in the building. And
that's a lot.
It is. And I was a second-year AD. And
that's like a junior college, like you're the AD over a junior college. You got 4,200 kids. That's incredible.
And it was my second year. And so I feel like it was like the analogy of giving the keys to a Ferrari to a 16-year-old, right? I felt like, and I look back on it, and I was more of a manager than I was a leader. Like I didn't quite get the how to lead people part at that time. And I've even talked to a few of those coaches that were there when I first started. And I said, I was not good as an AD when I started out with you guys. I said, we got through it and we did some nice things. But when I look back at how did I grow leaders? How did I grow coaches? How did I challenge them? I was more like just doing enough to get by. And the car was going way too fast for me to steer. And really, the analogy works on a lot of levels. And so I feel like I learned an awful lot in my 5 years there. I mean, certainly we hosted a ton of state events because our gym could seat 5,000. So, we hosted the state championship for wrestling, for gymnastics, semifinals for basketball, state lacrosse. So I learned a lot about event management being in that role, but I didn't really learn a lot about leading people. And I've since grown a lot in that category. So I think that was one of my greatest failures. And I certainly use it to motivate me to be better now that I'm year 21 as opposed to year 2.
Well, that's a great observation. Thanks for sharing that with us. Let's talk now about your first year in Fairfax 21 years ago, and now as the NIAAA president. How has the job of an AD changed in those 21 years?
Wow. Some of it's the same. So relationship piece being important and such. I think more has been added to the AD's plate, right? I think when I first started out, nobody had turf fields. So you were more concerned about watching the weather and rainouts and reschedules for things in your stadium. And now that everybody has turf fields, you don't have to worry about that. You're scheduling stuff all the time, getting in there and your schedule's full. And I think more and more got put on the athletic administrator's plate in regards to expectations, and some of it's good. Digital ticketing, like there's a lot video boards and trying to find people to run and live stream. And, before you just had to get ticket takers and your scoreboard operator, PA person, and you were fairly well ready to run an event. Now it's much more of a production now. But I think we also have better resources. With the expectations, we did get better resources. I mean, huddle was not a thing when I first started. I remembered like dropping off VHS tapes, at
Saturday morning,
Waffle House on a Saturday morning and doing that stuff, or actually having to go scout a basketball game in person and write down what they're doing and such. But the technology and advancements have helped. But I think the time expectation sometimes I think is a burden for some who don't feel comfortable telling folks or delegating responsibilities to people. Because I heard on a podcast not terribly long ago, somebody was working 100 hours a week as an AD. You can't sustain that. There's no way. If you're doing it right, you're in season, you're probably like 50 to 60 hours max. Because if you're not taking time for you and your family, and I'm lucky I wasn't overwhelmed early because I had young kids, but both of mine are either in or out of college at this point. And so I can take on the additional time and responsibility and not have issues. And I think that's been the changes. The expectation of time of us in our job is greater than it was when I first started.
Very good. Thanks for sharing that. Let's talk for a moment about your journey. So if my math is correct, and hopefully it is, 6 years in Virginia, which means you've had another 16 years in Missouri. And so you're one of the few ADs that's been on this podcast that has worked in 2 different states. And then, of course, now your journey with the the NIAAA as well.
Yeah, and I have great. I think it's really lucky to be able to work in 2 states and 2 geographic areas, because I didn't just know Virginia folks. We work closely with Maryland, DC, the border states, West Virginia, Kentucky. So even in our section, I knew people, and I was very, even in my first job, Hutch, was at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Tech, which is like the top high school academically in the country. If you follow any of those ratings, right?
Yeah,
it's number 1. And so I learned a lot about the importance of academics in that particular situation. And the principal I had there, Elizabeth Lodel, great role model for me, and wasn't a mentor. I didn't list her because I was only there 1 year, but man, she was good. And she was, truth be told, I've now been in, this is my 21st year. That was the only principal that did not get hired when I got hired. So all my other spots, I was hired by a brand new principal to that building, except at Thomas Jefferson, which is, when I was thinking about and preparing for this, I was like, man, that's really kind of weird that I've been fortunate in Robinson and at Jefferson City High School, and then now here at Lee's Summit North, the principal and I came in together, which has helped because we're both coming at the same time. We can work on our expectations, what we want to get accomplished. Really cool. But Elizabeth really helped me get started in there. And then getting to Missouri, being in Section 5 is awesome, right? I mean, you think of like those states and all the folks, the leaders in Nebraska and Kansas and the Rich Bichards and Lee and Lane Greens of the world. And then you go up to Army and Mike Purdy and such in Nebraska, and even, North and South Dakota. It's helped me grow. Like I got to spend a lot of time with Jason Weberg in North Dakota. And, he has a lot different things to worry about than I do in a metropolitan area. And sometimes we lose focus of what each other has to deal with, right? I mean, he has an ice rink at his school, but the rodeo was coming in to use his ice rink. and they can schedule it whenever they want because it's run through Parks and Rec, not through the school district. So they can run the rodeo on the same night as a Friday night football game. So like in an urban area where I've been most of my life, I don't think about stuff like that or have an understanding. Whereas I've really gotten to learn from my Section 5 folks a lot about differences and such. And then when I got to the national level involvement, it's been awesome, Mark. I mean, professionally, when people say, what do you do to grow? I mean, just the network and conversations that I can have with you. I can pick up the phone with you, with Jamie Sheets in Utah, with Damian Frassinelli in Connecticut, Tony Fisher in Minnesota. I feel like I could drive through almost any state, pick up the phone and call an AD and say, hey, I just broke down. Can you help me out? And I feel like somebody in one of the states I would know close enough to have that assistance. So I think, for people who want to get involved, it started with me being on a committee and taking leadership training classes, because you get to know the instructors, you get to know people who are in your class. That really helped me to get involved with the NIAAA.
Very good. Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's go to a lighter part of the program, something that we don't normally get to. And of course, the third party in this maybe or may not remain nameless, but I want you to talk about the Tons of Tired episode. It's a board story. And so I'm hoping, obviously, the people that have been on the board across this country love it, but I'm hoping that those that haven't had a chance get an insight to what goes on outside those board meetings. So take it away, Mike.
It's a lot of fun. We get to know each other really well, and we can joke with each other. So the name Nameless, she's being named right now. So Becky Moran was on the board with me, who's now, assistant executive director in the NIAAA. And Jamie Sheets and I, we were driving to the Prairie, which was like our night activity on one of the nights we were in Indy for the board, and we go to see a concert and stuff. And so we had the sodas and waters and stuff in the cooler in the car. And so we're driving to listen to this concert, and everybody else is in the van driven by the chauffeur, Phil Rising, and
the Bad Moon Rising.
Phil Bad Moon Rising. And so Becky gets a flat tire. And so Jamie and I think, hey, this is pretty cool. Not a big deal. We'll get off on the side of the interstate, right? And we'll change the tire.
Yeah.
So we pull over, and Becky goes, well, we go, where's the spare? Becky goes, I don't have a spare. And Jamie goes, well, what do you mean you don't have it? Every car has a spare. And she goes, no, I truly don't have a spare tire. And so we can't even believe it. So we open it up. Of course, there's no spare, and Becky's right. So this is Saturday night at like 5:00. And so we're like, man, we got to find a tire place. So we get online and we find a place that's close by, Tons of Tires, and they're still open, and they have her tire in stock, right? And so all the stars are aligning. So Becky tries to get a tow there, and she can't get one right away. And so we end up, Jamie and I get one that comes, but of course the tow truck comes and they don't have room for Jamie and I. So Becky we felt bad because Becky's getting in the car with the tow truck with this guy. We don't know, right? And so Jamie and I are like, well, we'll meet you there. Well, it's a 2-mile walk from where we were on the side of the interstate to Tons of Tires. Thankfully, it wasn't too bad. It started to rain. We had thunder. Now, Jamie and I will probably tell you it was pouring buckets, but it was probably more sprinkling. But it was raining as we were walking to Tons of Tires. And
walking on the side of the freeway.
Yeah, we're on the side. Yeah, we are the side of an interstate highway. Eventually, I felt like at times we were like Frogger trying to get across the road before we got hit by cars. And we get to Tons of Tires, and I think they are now going to become an NIAAA sponsor. Now that Becky's in charge of sponsorship, I think she's working on getting them in to be, since they were so helpful. They got her a tire, and I'm going to be honest, the other board members, I'm not sure how concerned they were with Mike and Becky and Jamie's well-being as much as they were that we had the cooler in the car, and when were we going to make it to the Prairie? So we got a couple calls from them. They actually came to Tons of Tires to pick up the cooler to make sure that they had the soda and water. So it actually worked out. Becky, we have pictures of it. We might have made it into a PowerPoint presentation. And she may have gotten a few fix-a-flats for Christmas that year, but we had a really good time with it. And I think that's the best part about being involved in the NIAAA, whether you're on the board or not, is the friendships that you make, the lifelong friendships, because none of us are going to forget that story. And we laugh then, we laugh now, and it's just really awesome to be able to have so many what I call true friends at this point that I've served on the board or even just worked on through the NIAAA with leadership training or workshops or whatever. I mean, Mike Elson, Mike from Tennessee.
Oh, yes.
We hooked up one year. We were assigned to do a workshop together in Indianapolis on transitioning from middle school to high school athletics. We didn't know each other at that point. And now, look at us. He's Kovaleski winner and I'm involved in the board and such. And I mean, just ironically, we were thrown together in a workshop and I got to know and meet him. And we've spent time at his school in Tennessee as we've driven through. And so I'm so happy with the lifelong friendships that I've been able to establish as being part of our organization.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Of course, I had the chance to be on the board years before you did, but I think the Valpo bus may even still be talked about in the boardroom and many other stories. So that's an incredible story. So let's get a little bit more serious now. And I want you to reflect upon your time, 8 months now of being the NIAAA president. And what a blessing it's been. And I want you to expand a little bit more on that. I know you talked about being on the board, but talk specifically about the chance you've had to be the president.
Yeah, it's been a really exciting year, Hutch. I was just reflecting on this yesterday with Phil on a different conversation that, man, we've had a lot. So we started off with Mike announcing Dr. Blackburn, his retirement from the NIAAA at the first board meeting I was in charge of in February of running. And so, I was educated on that process through the POP manual of how to hire, if we wanted to hire internally, if we wanted to post and then lead the board through that process. And then it was a lengthy process to get Phil in, and then the assistants, which took a little longer than we anticipated. And we came up with a different format when Sharice turned in her resignation letter. It allowed us to be a little creative and hire 2 assistants, Becky and Rich Barton from Utah. Becky, we've already talked about. So that took a lot of time and energy and focus. Also with the 50th anniversary of Title IX this year, that's been fantastic to lead people through that. We formed a subcommittee. Becky was in charge of that subcommittee to highlight, and I feel like the association's done a great job highlighting female leaders throughout the years and their impact on Title IX. And, and I'm so proud when you look at Peg Pennepacker, who's going to be inducted in the Hall of Fame this year, the 50th anniversary of Title IX year, she was in tears, when she got that notification. And that's really special that we get to celebrate that. And I think people who know me know how passionate I am about being inclusive and really looking forward to with my work with the DEI, which is now a committee, and reaching out to underrepresented ADs, whether they're female, people of color. That's been pretty important to me. My motto this year is value others. And I just, I had a coin that I made for the board members to hand out to folks for people that they valued. And so those are circulating around and doing stuff. And I know a lot of people have gotten positive feedback. Some people gave it to their secretary and they're in tears because they just, it's just something like physical that you can say, hey, this is how I feel about you, kind of deal. And I think that's important for me as a person is making sure the people that I work with, that I'm friends with, that they feel like they're valued. And that's from, we've heard the stories from the building custodians. And if you come through and ask my custodians, hey, does this guy know your name? Does he, what's your relationship like with the AD? I'm pretty confident they'd feel pretty positive about that because we spend a lot of time building those relationships. And I've been able to do that as working through the presidency and as we start to make some, and I also co-authored a class with Josh Scott and some other great authors, 704, which is going to be hopefully rolling out here in December. And then also was part of revision of 726 that I co-wrote with Susan Robbins. So it's really been a busy presidential year. I've had the opportunity to, go to different section meetings, which was great. And that's always nice to be able to see how other states and sections do their conferences and meetings. And so I've been just really blessed this is really the first year in a while that we haven't had COVID, and I've been able to travel and do all this stuff. And hopefully this convention in Nashville, we're 100% ready to go, no restrictions. And that's been a blessing because, with Lisa and Lannis having to go through that the last 2 years, hopefully this will be the first year where we're all back together and it's just really one big, fantastic convention. And I know Kelly Fish and that host committee is doing a great job getting ready for this conference. I actually got to go to Nashville, the Gaylord in June, bringing some kids to a work HOSA competition. And so hotel looks great. The new water park looks great. So if you're bringing your family, there's a place for them to swim and do some stuff. And I've had a really good year, Hutch, and I really think that I'm just blessed to have this opportunity to serve in this role.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for sharing that part about the coin, because I did have one at one time that was given to me. That's since been passed on. And I just think that's such a great idea and a positive. Allow me a follow-up to what you said earlier. So what was it like? Because there's maybe 2 NIAAA presidents that I know of. You're getting ready, the board comes in, you do your subcommittee work, you do all that stuff. Business as usual, you're the president, you've got to run the agenda. And as I understand it, right before the meeting start, Mike says, hey, can I talk to you, or something like that. And he drops the bomb on you, or maybe it was Phil, and then you have to deal with that. So just talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, that was pretty much what happened. Mike called me in and said, hey, FYI, I'm going to tender my letter of resignation effective next January. I was like, so, all right, Mike, people are going to ask, did I drive you to this? Or do you thinking like, man, I think we're in good shape. I'm going to get out. Well, the getting's good. Mike McGurk's there. I think we're in good shape. Josh Scott will tell you that Mike was saying he's getting out because Mike McGurk's president. And I think I'm not sure there aren't others that agree. And so he went through we went through the POP manual of what options we had. And then so going into Phil had no idea. So going into the boardroom, we had to go to closed session where Mike and Phil weren't there. And we had to talk about what we wanted to do and the process options that we had. And then the officers interviewed Phil. We had some questions for him to see if he was ready to take on that role as executive director. The board unanimously voted to elevate Phil in that spot. And then we started working on the process for the assistant or associate, which now are assistants. And again, it's an interesting process, Mark, because there's so many chiefs, right? We're all leaders. And then just to be able to work together and to come up with such a creative out of the box solution. Like, I don't think when we started this process, people would have said, oh yeah, you're going to hire 2 assistant directors and you're going to hit home runs with Becky Moran and Rich Barton. And so it took a while to get there. But I think in the end, it was the great work of the board. Appreciate everybody who applied and interviewed. I mean, we spent a lot of time going through the process to try to finalize this, but I think, we're in really good hands with Phil taking over and Mike still being there and through this conference and being able to do that. And so it's been really awesome. After the initial shock, right, of being one of the 3 that's had to replace the executive director, and the board just did a fantastic job of working through the process and having some great dialogue as we kind of went back and forth on some of the different options. So I know people are like, what did the board actually do? They have a lot of good, honest dialogue and a lot of great feedback back and forth. And I can tell you they are very thoughtful in their decision-making process.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Talk for just a few moments about the most recent NIAAA conference in Denver. And of course, it was after one or two, well, the virtual, but we had the Tampa virtual. But just share just 1 or 2 observations regarding that before we wrap this up.
Yeah, I think it was awesome. I think people were excited to be back together. I saw a lot of hugging, even with masks on. It was fine. I mean, I think, and I love that people were so okay of wearing a mask, and just there were some people very worried about COVID and some not, but everybody seemed to get along. To be able to honor people in person was fantastic. We had the award ceremony to do from the year before. And so, and to allow Lannis and Lisa, they did a great job working together to allow both of them the experience of being an in-person president. And so that was really cool to see Lannis get his opportunity, and Lisa sharing that opportunity with Lannis. And so I think it was great. And nobody had been to Denver. And so it was nice to see a different city. But again, we're going back to Nashville, and people love it there. You can walk across the street to the mall and go downtown. I mean, there's the Titans are in town, the Predators are in town. I mean, there's going to be a lot to do this year when we get to Nashville.
Share with us, Mike, your favorite part of your job.
For me, there's two. One, in the building, the favorite part is still working with kids. I have a student leadership group that I work with twice a month. I love still having that contact with the kids. It makes me feel youthful, even though I'm not. I said makes me feel youthful. And then for me, it's the relationships that I have built with people across the country. Like just, the different opportunities, like the professional development conference, which is an opportunity to meet with people, the conference, section meetings. I don't have a whole lot of friends like in Kansas City that I hang out with per se. But the NIAAA is my family, and I have a huge family, and I've been able and fortunate to build a lot of great relationships with people who I would go to the mat for, right? I mean, there's a lot of people, they would call me in a heartbeat, and I would be there for them. And that relationship piece and just getting to know folks, that's been the best part of my job. That's why I love being so involved with the NIAAA.
Thanks for sharing. Quickly share your 2 suggestions for a brand new AD that they would follow these suggestions in order to be a success. What would those 2 suggestions be?
Number one, it's got to be my theme, right? Value others. Make sure your admin assistant, if you have one, feels valued. Your building folks, your teachers, your coaches, they got to feel like they're going to go through the wall for you if there's a situation. And 2, I think I spoke to a little bit, don't be afraid to create some time for yourself. Like with all the mental health issues that we have and such, and the obstacles we've overcome and the adversity, take time for yourself, time for you and your family, and don't apologize if you miss a school event because you're taking care of yourself or spending time to watch your kid play youth sports or whatever the situation may be. You've earned the time off to be able to spend some time with your family, and don't apologize for that and feel guilty about missing something at school.
Great points. Thanks for sharing that. Let's finish with this, Mike. What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
How did you overcome the adversity of working with Josh Scott for so long? No,
I can't wait till he hears this. That's going to be awesome.
Josh is like a brother to me. I mean, we both came into Missouri the same year, and we were in schools pretty close to each other. And so our career path has been pretty similar. And he's one of my dearest friends. And, people know that we play golf together, we fish, and we've had some stories about that. And Phil and Lannis, like, that's what I mean by family. I can joke with my family members, and it's not personal, and we have a good time, and we give and take a little bit, and so Josh is a really good guy, and he's been a really good servant leader for Missouri and for the nation. And so at times I like to give him some static. So that would have been the one question I asked, but I think, Mark, these podcasts are fantastic. I listen to a bunch of them because I learned so much, personal stories that I maybe don't get that chance to from time to time. So I appreciate people like you and hanging with the ADs and Paradox and Jake and all those folks that do podcasts that really get the different stories out to people and highlight a lot of different folks from across the country. And so the work you guys are doing is fantastic, and really just appreciate that you guys take the time to do this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You're too kind. So that wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guest today has been Mike McGurk, Certified Master Athletic Administrator and President of the NIAAA. Again, thanks for being on the podcast today, Mike.
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate the invite.
For our viewers and our listeners, I should say, please tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.